Well, I mean, look, I think it's, I don't really know what types of films Australia should be making. I mean, I think there's a lot of stories here that need to be told, and I think this one is certainly a very interesting, take on one that perhaps we think we're familiar with. It's not really a film about World War I or about Gallipoli actively in that time necessarily. It's sort of more about the aftermath and one father's, journey of discovery. But I think what's really interesting about this particular one is the angle it takes and in looking at the effects on the Turkish side of things as well. And I think Russell will share this sentiment. But for most of us working on the film, I think it was somewhat eye-opening and certainly a little embarrassing to sort of learn how little we actually knew about that. And the war for them didn't end with the peace treaty and sort of everyone shipping out. It was sort of a rolling thing and had been for hundreds of years before. And it was just, I found that fascinating. But look, in a way, this is an Australian story, but also not. Also something that has really, kind of universal themes. And I think that's important.
Did most of what you know about World War I come from preparation for this film? In a way, yeah. I mean, I think, as an Aussie, as someone that's attended dawn services and, participated in Anzac Day, things before, it's like you have a basic understanding of certain things. I mean, I didn't have any relatives that fought in the war, and so there wasn't really a personal connection to that time and that period, per se, but, I learned a lot in preparing for this, and it was fascinating. That sounds like a bit of a pity that you need to make a movie in order to learn about the history of your country.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess somewhat is. I mean, you're always kind of picking up knowledge on things when you delve into things a little deeper.
Describe Lieutenant-Colonel Cyril Hughes.
He's a man with a monumental task at his hands. He was appointed by the British Empire to basically head up the Imperial War Graves Commission. And their kind of the works out there in establishing the remembrance, and sort of first and foremost, the way in getting that started is to locate the dead, really, and start organising that. And when you really think about what he was tasked with, I mean that battlefield was left an absolute mess, and beyond there being some kind of mass graves and effort to clean up while the war was still happening, there was collapsed trenches and, unexploded mines and all this kind of refuse from that time. And, he's a guy who had to head up a dig site and do something very kind of, approach something very practically, but with also having a deep emotional connection to it. He fought on Gallipoli with the first light horse, and had quite an incredible journey in and out of being part of the Australian Armed Forces.
What effect did putting on the uniform have on you that first time?
I think just perspective, is a really powerful thing, and we talked about learning a bit about the history and somewhat, it being somewhat embarrassing there when you discover just how little you know about a certain period, and throwing that uniform on is a very powerful thing, and you start to get into the mindset of what these fellas went through, and you can't ever, you can never really fully understand that because all you have is research and some photographic evidence and journal entries or whatever it is that you're kind of immersing yourself in to try and wrap your head around it. But it is a pretty incredible thing, and I think what you want to do is kind of justice, really, and that's the ultimate goal. I mean, we had this kind of somewhat fun task in preparation up at Russell's property. We're doing a bit of a training camp, and a lot of the guys didn't have horse riding experience, weapons experience, things like this, and we were up there to sort of build some camaraderie and get into that kind of headspace and also, pick up these skills that we needed to portray these characters. And one activity we did, which turned out to be, absolutely backbreaking, was dig a trench. And it sounds like, that's one trench that a bunch of guys with, fairly modern kind of tools and resources who's kind of hard yakka for us is like, guys are at this for months and years and in terrain that was completely unscalable. And, I think it's great when you can prepare for a movie by kind of somewhat practically trying to play that stuff out a little bit. And you'll never really be able to kind of imitate exactly what was going on, but it is cool if you can, try to somehow.
Mate, you've done all these high-profile American studio films. Then we see you shine in a small Australian film like Felony. Tell me honestly how appearing in Australian films figures into your career game plan.
Well, if I have a game plan, which I don't really know if I do yet or not, but that's incredibly important to me, Jim. Felony was, perhaps one of my most enjoyable professional endeavours, and I think some of my favourite films, growing up and around that sort of age where I was starting to wonder if being an actor was something I wanted to do, were Aussie. And there's something, I don't really know how to describe it, there's something kind of special about that. And it's not to say it needs to be a strictly Australian story. Felony could have taken place in any town, anywhere in the world, really, and you're still kind of looking at the same drama. But no, there is something incredible about coming back to the place you call home, and then doing something that's in your backyard, and not just physically shooting it here, but portraying someone that is like someone you grew up with or down the road. And it kind of there's a freedom within that doesn't come with doing an American thing. I mean, I have done quite a few American films now, and throwing that accent on, adjusting it for different characters has become part of just about every character. And it was weird for me to come and work again in an Australian accent, but also liberating, because there's that extra, you're not tackling that extra hurdle, that extra piece of costume that you've got to lay on in order to find that character. It was something where you could, there was a neutrality to it that I really enjoyed kind of working with. So I hope that continues for a long time. I mean, by no means am I driven by kind of fame or overexposure or anything like that. And for me, it's just about creative fulfillment. And I think there's a lot of Aussie talent making some great stuff. It's a shame that the studio system is such that it's so hard to get films up down here, fully independent ones. But I certainly hope to be involved in more.
Tell me about the moustache. It's an obvious character point.
Yeah, look, it was something that, we actually didn't know. Hughes is a biographical figure. I was playing a real man, and the photos that I couldn't, there's pretty much two photos I could find of him, and they're both from a distance, and obviously photographic technology back in, the early part of the 20th century was somewhat limited, so I had no idea if he had a moustache or not, but it was just one of those things we played with. I was in the training camp with quite a full beard. I just, tend to do that when I'm not working, and thought this would be, let's try it and see when you're trying to when you're putting the uniform on, when you're, stepping into costume and starting to look at yourself in the mirror and think about this character. And it just felt right, it felt like something of that time. And so, we rolled with it. It kind of worked, and we rolled with it.
I know that every man and his dog is going to ask you what Russell Crowe was like as a director. And guess what? So am I. To illustrate what he's like, can you give me an instance where he gave you a direction that taught you something that you didn't know?
Sure, yeah. No, well, I'll start by saying what might sound like an obvious answer, but, he was great as a director. It was his first foray into that. And, I've worked with first-time directors before, and I think there's always there's no secret of what someone takes on when they choose to make that transition. It's not just about pointing the camera at something and all of a sudden you're directing. It's the preparation to shoot a movie, and then the actual physical production, and then going into the edit and really discovering what you found, what you got, and threading that, crafting that into the finished product is, a really lengthy, time-consuming
hard task, and I think I commend anyone that actually gets it done. You know, it really is fascinating to me still. But I know it was an absolute joy for him and a real joy for us. He has an incredible understanding of what it's like to perform. Obviously, with his success being an actor, I think that was great when it crept into prepping his cast. He was meticulous in casting the film and really wanted to work with particular kinds of people, and I think he could probably elaborate on what that meant to him, but I know it wasn't just about kind of grabbing whoever or whatever. It was like it was a lengthy audition process for a lot of the roles, and he was he really owned that position. And some directors, it is just about, okay, here's the camera, do the thing, that's how I want the performance to be done. Some directors are really collaborative and want you to bring a lot, and I think Russell walked this, he juggled all of that really well, and it was inspiring to see him sort of wearing both hats in the fact that he's starring in a film as well, because he'd be in the ground crying, having an incredibly emotional kind of exploration through a certain part of the movie, and then he's up out of the mud, he's directing the extras, he's checking the shot, doing the monitors, adjusting not only his own performance but that of the actors around him that are in the scene, and then rolling straight into another take and being there emotionally present as well. And so that was fascinating for me to witness, and a real pleasure to be sort of under his instruction somewhat. Russell respects the people he's cast in it as well, so it's not necessarily about saying that's not how you do it. But there were times we did a scene together, quite a contained, dramatic scene, and he was really great in kind of, I remember him adjusting my performance and, just talking to me about the importance of just knowing exactly where the camera was, and, it's something very subtle, but how powerful that can be when it's translated, onto the screen. And, just as simple as like not breaking eye contact at a particular moment. And something like that might sound like, oh yeah, cool, but that only comes with experience, that only comes with really knowing the value of it and then seeing that. And, it's something like that where I really, you take that and you pocket that, because that's something you don't forget. And next time, it's not about going, okay, in this scene I won't break eye contact, but you might understand that there's a moment when it may not even feel natural so much, but cinematically it's going to have great effect, and therefore you adjust your performance accordingly.
Now, with Water Diviner and Unbroken, you are in two movies that show the horrors of war, but also have this theme of forgiveness, of not holding a post-war grudge. Is this some remarkable coincidence, or is it a value that you subscribe to?
It is. Look, I mean, I'm not going to say I don't subscribe to the value, but that didn't really have anything to do with getting involved with those projects. So it is somewhat of a coincidence, and funnily enough, they both were shot here. I flew at one point from one war directly into another. The logistics were such that I finished on Angelina's movie the day before I had to start on Russell's. So it was quite funny, and I found that amusing, but beyond that there was nothing more. I mean, they're obviously very different stories and take place in very different times, but it was just one of those funny coincidences, really. But I think both films discuss some really important themes, and I do value that opinion, that's for sure.